Hey guys, what is up? Randomosity Remix is here today, and I have a bit of an interesting video today, a bit of a different video from what I normally put up. So you guys have probably noticed that I've been a bit inactive recently, and the reason for that is because of college. I am actually a full-time college student. I've been very, very busy with college assignments and whatnot, and college is finally coming to the close. It's the end of the semester for me. And one of the greatest opportunities that I actually had this past semester was to take a class in music theory. I've never taken a music theory course before. I've never had any formal instruction in theory. Well, okay, that's not entirely true. I used to play the piano, and my piano teacher taught me a little bit of theory, but it was a very teensy tiny amount. It was not a lot of theory. So taking a full-time sort of like real introduction to music theory class was an incredible experience. I had a great professor, a lot of really cool classmates, and I learned a lot of really cool things. And for our final assignment, we got to do this really, really neat project where we picked a piece that we're a fan of. We picked a musical work that we like, analyzed sort of the sheet music for that work and the theory behind that work, and then created a work of our own. So for this assignment, I decided to pick a piece by Enya. Some of you may know her. She's a fairly famous, well, I shouldn't even say fairly, she's a pretty famous artist. She does a lot of really, really beautiful music with Celtic influences and just a lot of new age sounds, and it's very, very beautiful. And I picked Enya's music because she's had like a very big musical impact on me. I've been listening to her music since I was a baby. My parents used to play it to help me go to sleep, and I still have her albums sort of on my phone. I still listen to them at night to go to sleep now. So it's just, her music has a really huge impact on my life, and I thought, if I'm going to do a song based on an artist I really like, I'm going to pick Enya. I'm going to pick her. So specifically, the song that I picked to inspire my own piece was Watermark. It's one of her songs, and I cannot play it. I know usually in these types of videos I will play the piece and then like show my remix or my composition and see so you can see how they compare. But as you probably guessed, Enya's work is copyrighted, and so because it's copyrighted, I can't play it. But I will leave a link in the description, so you can actually use that link to go listen to it, and then you can come back to this video after you've listened to it, and it'll be all good. So to sort of show stuff off, you've probably seen this sheet music on screen here. What we had to do was first we had to compose the piece. So after I listened to Watermark a few times, I picked out all of like my favorite parts of it and had it influence my own piece. So here you guys can see all the sheet music, which is really, really cool. That is another thing that I learned specifically this semester that I'd never known how to do before. I'd never known how to write sheet music. So it was really cool getting that skill. But this is all the sheet music, and I'm going to dive more into the theory in the sheet music in a little bit. But what I want to do first is actually play the song for you so you can just hear it. And while that's happening, I'll just shut up. I'll stop talking. Literally just let the piece speak for itself, and then I'll go into a little bit more detail about what's going on in the piece and sort of what's happening with it. So yeah, we'll go ahead and just sort of do it. So there you go. That was the piece I wrote. It's called, you probably saw the name earlier, but it's called An Altar for the Angel. And I'll also talk about why I picked that name in just a sec. But actually, yeah, why not? I'll start with that. So when writing this piece, I picked that name because you guys know me. Like, this is a video game remix channel. I love video games, and I'm actually in school studying programming and game development. I've always had an idea for like a fantasy game kind of swirling in my head, and I wanted like one of the main characters to have angel wings. And I always thought like if there was a scene maybe in a chapel or something where she's kind of standing at an altar and the main character walks in and sort of like sees her on her own, like a song like this would fit a scene like that perfectly. Just kind of slowly walking up and being like, hey, why are you here? And all that kind of stuff. So I love kind of writing pieces and then thinking up scenes or context for them in my head. But yeah, so that's my piece, An Altar for an Angel. Now that you've gotten a chance to sort of hear it in its entirety, I'll dive into the theory a little bit and break down sort of the individual parts of it and what I got inspired by Watermark. What parts of it got inspired by Watermark. So let's go ahead and go back to the sheet music here, and I'll start talking. So one of the most important things you'll probably notice is the bass line. In the bass clef, the notes kind of do this legato arpeggiation, where they go up and down for each note of whatever given chord is in that particular measure. This is something that Enya does extensively in Watermark. It's done pretty much the entire song. So I got inspired by that and did that for the entirety of my song as well. You get this nice arpeggiation of the bass clef notes here. And it really gives the song sort of a steady rhythm. And it also establishes sort of the chord for every given measure and kind of conveys what key the song itself is in. From like more of a kind of rhythm point of view, Watermark uses a ton of slurs and ties. So you see this little bar here above these notes. This is called a slur, and so in music, especially like when you're playing piano, it kind of indicates that you're supposed to be blending the notes together and sort of like playing them together smoothly. So there's a lot of those slurs, and then if you have a note like this that connects to another note over a measure, this is called a tie, and it basically means hold that note. So there's a lot of slurs and ties in Watermark, and so I sort of mimic that in my own piece, and what it results in is kind of this smooth, like really drawn out, very zen sort of sound. Like it's calming and very like nice and stretched out. Now in Watermark there was also a brief reprieve. Music, usually people will talk about it in terms of what are called phrases. So like a musical phrase is kind of like a complete, succinct musical idea that sort of exists on its own. Like if you're listening to a pop song, the chorus, or like they sing the chorus of the pop song, is kind of like a musical phrase, because if you listen to the chorus on its own, it would kind of make musical sense just on its own. So in Enya's song, in Watermark, she establishes the beginning of the song, and that's its own phrase, and it repeats, I think, twice. And then after repeating twice, she completely breaks the listener's expectations by going into a short reprieve where she introduces a different musical phrase that's like completely separate than the one that she did earlier. So I also mimic that. So like if you go back to the beginning, there's this part. So this is like the basic musical phrase. So this is the main idea that's established right from the get-go. And that idea repeats twice. So it goes through sort of that those notes once, and then it goes through them again. And the second time it goes through them, it introduces the violin and the vocals. And then after the listener's kind of primed and they've heard that musical phrase twice, we come in and we sucker punch them in the face. We completely break their expectations by having this reprieve here that is completely separate from the sound that was established before. So that whole section there, it's a completely new musical phrase, smack dab in the middle of the piece. It helps keep things fresh. It helps keep the listener on their toes. And it also helps elevate the piece. And my favorite part is the very end, like leads right back into the original musical phrase. So. And then boom, we're right back to where we started. So that was actually, the reprieve itself was actually really fun to write. When I make music, I always worry about getting stuck in what they call like bar syndrome. Like, you write like 4 bars and then you don't know what else to do, so you keep looping those bars over and over again. Especially because I make a lot of like sort of, video gamey music, which is inherently loopy in and of itself. I always worry about getting stuck in the bar syndrome and being like, oh no, like, my song is just playing the same thing over and over and over again. So I try and mix stuff up, like changing drum beats and like my other music, or in this case, like putting this section in there so that it's not just the same phrase over and over and over again. And then another really important component of Watermark that I took inspiration for in my piece was dyads. So a lot of people know about triads. I knew about triads even before I took this class, which is, you can see them right here. It's a cluster of 3 notes. When 3 notes are played together, they harmonize very, very well. It's commonly referred to as a chord. But what you can do is if you only have 2 notes as opposed to 3, so instead of these 3 down here, we have these 2. That is called a dyad. And up until this point, I don't think I had ever seen in sheet music, or in any of the sheet music I played before, a song that had its main melody composed entirely of dyads. So when I was looking at the sheet music for Watermark and listening to Watermark, and I was like, wow, the melody for this is entirely composed of dyads. I was like really surprised, but pleasantly surprised. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to give that a shot. When I write my piece, I'm going to write a piece like completely consisting of dyads, because I've never done that before. And so it's this really cool kind of effect that you get where, actually, I'll go back to FL to show this off. But it's this like really cool effect, because it's like you get the sound of a chord, but like not a fully completed chord. But it's nice because, yeah, so I'll go ahead and so you can hear that. So see how it kind of sounds like an incomplete chord playing on its own? And then what's so awesome is that the other instruments kind of make up for the fact that there's no bottom note in these dyads. So it's like you have them playing on their own, they sound all right, but then you bring in like the bass clef, and it adds this whole other layer that kind of makes the chord sound more complete. And then don't even get me started like on when you start bringing in the strings and stuff, because then it just gets like, it helps like make the sound full. It gives it like a whole like full chord of a sound. It makes it sound right, which is really cool. So the last thing I kind of want to talk about is the instrumentation of the piece itself. So the actual like instruments I chose when I made it. So Watermark, I listened to it a bunch of times. Like I said, I've been listening to it since I'm a baby, so I've probably heard it God knows how many times. But the main instruments in Watermark are strings, piano, and then Enya's voice itself. Like Enya's voice is one of the instruments in that song. And so when I was making my song and I was picking the instruments for it, I wanted to hit kind of close to home since it was going to be inspired by Watermark. So I picked, if I go back to the sheet music here, I can show y'all. I picked a piano, so I picked a piano here. And then I picked when I was writing the string section, I just used a viola patch here in Note Flight. And then this thing right here that says tenor, this is actually vocals. So it's a tenor voice. That's what that means. So I wrote the piano, and then after writing the piano, I came in and I wrote the strings. And after writing the strings, I came in and I wrote the voice. And the voice was actually really fun to write because what I did was I sort of hummed into my phone's recording app to get a feel for what vocal notes I wanted, and then transcribe the sound of me humming to the sheet music. And then after doing that, I was going to just use like an orchestra patch in FL, but a lot of my orchestra patches sound pretty bad. And sort of in the spirit of the assignment, I was like, Enya uses her real voice. Like, what's stopping me from using mine? So I'm not like a professionally trained singer. I'm not like, super duper stellar, but I decided to give it a shot. So what I did was I recorded my voice into FL Studio, and I actually recorded myself 3 separate times. So I recorded myself once, and then I recorded myself again, and then I recorded myself a 3rd time. And what I did was I panned one of those recordings, the one right here, to the right, one of those recordings to the left, and I kept the other one centered. I did some audio balancing, added some reverb, some delay, and all that cool stuff. And then what's neat is that because these are all separate recordings, they sound slightly different, but when you play them together, they form up a sort of whole sound. It's not as perfect as Enya's. Like, Enya's voice is like on another level. She's like her own tier. Definitely not even close. But I think it sounds pretty good, and I think it gets the idea across. Like, I can kind of just play it on its own. Let me go back to FL. Yeah, here we go. So that was really, really fun to record. Full disclosure, I love humming. I remember when I was like a kid, my parents used to get annoyed because I would like be sitting in the house humming music, and they would be like, "Oh my god, you're so annoying! Stop humming!" And I was like, "Okay." But yeah, so I did like a little bit there. The starkest difference between the original piece and this one is that obviously Enya is a woman, and her voice is very high pitched. I am a man with a very deep, sort of baritone voice. So there's no way in the world I can emulate the way that she sings. So I kind of opted to play to my strengths and keep my vocals low, so they kind of support the bass in the song. If you ever watched The Hobbit and you remember that the Misty Mountain song, I don't know, but like when I was listening to myself humming, it sort of like reminded me of that song from The Hobbit. When they're sitting in Bilbo's house, and like, the winds were howling. Oh, I love that song so much. It's one of my favorite songs from a film score. But that is kind of it. This is an altar for the angel. This is the piece that I wrote for my music theory class, and I'm really proud of it. It turned out super great. It's a lot of firsts for me. It's my first time doing vocals, first time writing sheet music, lots of really cool stuff. And just sort of as the last sort of ending to the video, huge shout out and thank you to my professor, Professor Nick. Your music theory class was an absolute joy to be in. I learned so much. And I know, like, kind of with the foundation that we like laid out here together, I feel like I can only really go up. There's so much more to learn, and it's going to be like a really, really fun journey getting there. But yeah, it was an amazing semester. I had a really great time, and thank you guys so much for watching. See you later. Bye.